You have the call.
Thank you, Chair. We might need Assistant Commissioner Nutt for this one. I suspect it falls into his area of responsibility. Assistant Commissioner, are you aware of a person flying the flag of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine at a rally in Melbourne on the weekend of 7-8 February?
I've seen the media, Senator, yes.
Yep. Is the AFP investigating this?
We are not investigating it, Senator.
What's the reason for that?
We obviously looked at it in terms of how that incident may fit within the prohibited symbols framework, and on review we have not identified that an offence has been committed.
Why does it not fit in the threshold for the hate symbols legislation?
It's not a symbol of a prescribed terrorist organisation in Australia that is used to identify a prescribed terrorist organisation in Australia.
Is that because the PFLP is not listed as a terrorist organisation? Is that what you're saying?
Essentially, Senator, that's correct.
That's interesting because you and I have had a discussion about this once in this forum before, yes, where you said that it wasn't necessary for an organisation to be listed as a terrorist organisation in order for the prohibited hate symbols legislation to be brought into effect. Has your advice changed on that?
Not at all. It's just how a terrorist organisation, the law around terrorist organisation works in Australia under Australian law. And it can be done through prescription, as we've discussed, but it can also be done through conduct, and conduct in the course of an investigation, where it's established that individuals are acting as a terrorist organisation.
So is it your evidence that the PFLP is not acting as a terrorist organisation?
In the circumstances of the display that we're talking about, it is not for us to consider whether that our investigation would list that organisation as a terrorist organisation.
No, it's just a separate question to the listing, but as we've discussed and you've agreed, as long as that organisation is a terrorist organisation, regardless of whether it's prescribed in the criminal code or not, it's still an offence to display their symbols.
So when we look in the circumstances around that display, the individuals that were involved in that display were not acting as a terrorist organisation, and that symbol,
well, of course not.
was not used to identify a terrorist organisation.
Well, one would hope that the people of that rally were not acting as a terrorist organisation. So is it your evidence that for a non-listed terrorist organisation, the only way for the prohibited hate symbols legislation to be given effect is if those individuals themselves are acting as a terrorist organisation?
And we had evidence on hand, and I'm saying evidence of conduct, that the individuals connected under investigation involved in displaying a symbol of a terrorist organisation.
So, had the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine been listed as a terrorist organisation, would you have come to a different conclusion? Well,
then the situation would have to be investigated, and the other limbs of the offence would have to be met.
Of course, but progress. Presuming that, all else being equal,
it would have been subject to investigation. So
yeah. So, in this instance, you decided not to investigate because the PFLP was not listed as a terrorist organisation and these individuals were not acting in the capacity of a terrorist organisation. But had they been listed as a terrorist organisation, you would have investigated them.
For the offences to apply,
yes,
that's where we would look at whether they're a terrorist organisation and or listed or prescribed as a terrorist organisation.
Right, well,
it's the requirements of the offences, Senator.
It's funny you should say that, because a couple of weeks ago I wrote to the Minister for Home Affairs and I copied in the Attorney General, and I encouraged him to list the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine as a terrorist organisation, because I was concerned that a possible gap in the law might arise where these people would not be charged under the prohibited hate symbols legislation. And he replied to me, I think it was yesterday, quote, "It's not true that an organisation must be listed as a terrorist organisation under the criminal code in order for offence to publicly displaying a terrorist organisation symbol to be made out. An organisation does not need to be proscribed in order for the offence to apply," end quote. But you've just told me that had they been listed, it's more likely that you would have investigated them for this offence.
What I said equally applies, Senator, that an organisation can be proved by conduct, and that's subject to preferring terrorist organisation charges in Australia in a criminal investigation. And again, in that circumstance, it's open to someone who we're prosecuting as being a terrorist organisation to display a symbol that's used to identify that organisation, and that offence would potentially be available. Obviously, the more simplest route, of course, is looking at known symbols to identify prescribed terrorist organisations.
Indeed, I agree with you, and that's exactly why I wrote to the Minister, and I asked that he put it beyond doubt so that Australians are not under the misapprehension and that it's a good idea to turn up to a rally with a flag of the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, which is unquestionably a terrorist organisation. We've listed it under our financial sanctions framework for 20 years as a terrorist organisation, which criminalises fundraising for this organisation. And it is clear to me, based on your evidence, that if we want to make sure it doesn't turn up at rallies in the future, that listing it is the most efficient way of doing that.
Obviously, listing is a matter for government.
Indeed, I agree with you. It is a matter for government. Just quickly moving on, I suspect this will be straightforward.
We were due to go to a break at 9.
I apologise. This will be very quick.
9:15.
I'm anticipating the officer's response here, and I think it will be quick. New South Wales Police have said they're investigating the 2 nurses at the centre of the New South Wales hospital incident. Is the AFP also investigating this matter?
Senator, what I can say to that one is that we've provided support to New South Wales, so they have the lead on the investigation, but we have supported them, and that includes through our international network overseas.
Are there any Commonwealth offences that could be engaged here?
That is something that I think New South Wales would still be working through, but equally they have the ability to use Commonwealth legislation if they deem appropriate.
So we will know at the end of their investigation whether or not any further Commonwealth offences need to be investigated by the AFP, or they will satisfy themselves that no Commonwealth offences have been committed.
I think that would be an accurate description.
Oh, sorry, that was 2 different provisions.
Sorry.
Which one?
Well, I think they need to continue their investigation to get to a point where they know what evidence they've got in front of them in terms of what appropriate offences might be
Sure,
used.
but if they don't think a Commonwealth offence has been committed, does that mean the AFP would then not investigate a Commonwealth offence?
We would have to have that engagement with them in terms of where they've landed and why, and then in turn whether that would be something that we would then investigate separately.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.